defense, he had his phone in his hand, and that he had read from the ESV. And as I got up and he got up, I said, "Here, you can just read from here." So he was planning on reading it from the ESV. So that Well, I'll tell you what, it is good to be here. And just so you know, I guess I caused a little bit of a traffic jam in the hallway this morning because you guys will disagree with me, but I'm going to say Eric didn't hit the bell, but since all the other classes left, I'm sure he did. But there is no bell at the sermon, so I just keep going, right? No, it's good to be here. It was good that camp has gotten started, especially good about the baptisms. But I'll tell you another thing that I found out, and I'd heard this once before. I'll probably get in trouble for this, but I was down at the camp on Friday night picking up Erica, and I just so happened to be there during the talent show. And I'll tell you what, I don't know if she'll do it for you, but you should ask Madison to sing for you. She has a beautiful voice, and she got up and she sang during the talent show, and I even filmed a little bit of it and sent it to their mom or to her mom and dad. I don't know if she didn't know I was filming her though. I don't think. But that was great to see. I had heard her sing before, but it's just great to see our young people, stepping out of shells and getting in front of their own peers and doing things such as that. And you know what? That's one of the great things about camp. A lot of times when you spend 5 days with someone, you get a lot more comfortable. And a lot more people will do different things such as that they wouldn't do anywhere else. But let's get into the lesson here. Well, I guess right before that, a couple more things, sorry. First of all, just don't forget, Brent had mentioned this, but my family and I, we will all be gone next Sunday. We're heading down to the camp Saturday night. And we will be there for the week for 5th and 6th grade. We asked for prayers for that week, but not just that week, all of the weeks that are to come, 7th and 8th grade this week, down through 3rd and 4th. Also, I had mentioned in Bible class that Erica had jumped on a plane and is in Florida. Pray for her while she's traveling with her friend. But I didn't mention that Courtney's coming home tonight. Or should I say tomorrow morning, since it's midnight that she's supposed to land. But unfortunately, you won't be able to see her for at least 2 weeks because she's coming down to camp with us as well. But pray today that she has safe travels returning home. She had a wonderful trip for the 6 weeks that they were going around and performing at different camps. And she found out that she needs to stay away from middle school boys because they've all fallen in love with her on this tour. But we're so happy she was able to do that, and definitely that it was successful, and she enjoyed herself. And not only that, in the environment that she was in, traveling to different church camps, being in a van with Christians, you can't beat something like that. I mean, it's like the idea of camp and that caliber, and why we go back to camp every year. Because we want to continue to build those bonds. We want to continue to be there to encourage one another. And in the world that we live in today, and not that things have changed, we're still dealing with Satan and sin just as they did 2,000 years ago, but we need to be just as ready as they needed to be. The book of Jude that we've been covering on Sunday morning, talking about this idea of false teachers coming in. And Jude actually says they're already here. In other words, you need to be ready. And if they were already there roughly 2,000 years ago, they're here today as well. And we need to be ready. And the only way we can do that is to know God's word, to seek out those that are struggling. I encourage you this morning that if you're sitting here with us, you're listening to this on Facebook, and you're sitting there and you're struggling with your faith right now, whether it comes down to struggling to believe in God. That's one I personally cannot fathom. I know there's a God. I believe there's a God. I know He created us. But that doesn't mean that I would knock someone that came to me and said, I'm struggling with believing in God. Or whatever it may be that's struggling to hold you back from being baptized and becoming a Christian, or something that's holding you back from, if you've already been a Christian, to rededicate yourselves. We want to encourage you, each and every one of us here today, whether you're talking about myself as the preacher, talking about our elders, talking about our deacons, talking about all of the members of this congregation. If you're struggling, please reach out. Let us know. I personally am willing to set up studies anytime that I can. You know, the Thursday morning study that we've been doing has been very successful. I think in the light of that, you know, I think being together is more important than anything. But just that avenue where we can add something in the week that we don't normally do and say, hey, if you're available at 10 a.m., hop on here on Facebook or Zoom and join in the discussion on this class. But if you're not available at 10 o'clock, you're at work, you're unable to be there, it's recorded on Facebook. And you can go back. And right now we just started the book of Isaiah on Thursday mornings. And if I will tell you this, I made the joke about Jude being a really, really long book. Isaiah really is a long book. I think 66 chapters, I believe, in the book of Isaiah. And just to put it this way, we started it last Thursday. We got halfway through the introduction. So that'll kind of tell you about that book and all the things that are going on with that. But there's other things too, but personal Bible study. Sometimes people who are learning the gospel for the first time, they feel uncomfortable sitting in a group of people that maybe they're looking at and saying, well, they already know more than me. I don't want to feel like I'm stupid, or I don't want to have that feeling, because that happens sometimes. We get uncomfortable. We would hope that we would never portray that, but sometimes when we're trying to learn and we're looking around at others and saying, man, they've been a Christian for so long, they know so much, how can I sit and have a class with them? Well, there are other ways. We will sit down personally with you. We will sit down personally with a group of you. And I say we because I'm saying myself, but I know also our eldership, our deacons, and really, maybe you're sitting there thinking, well, I don't know if I want to sit down with a preacher. Maybe I'm scary. I don't know. But you know what? There are other people in this audience as well that would gladly sit with you and study God's Word. We don't want anyone to drift away from God. We want you to stay with Him. The world will teach you in some aspects that, hey, once you become a Christian, you're always a Christian. They'll say, well, you see, the thing is, if somebody stopped being a Christian, they never really were one in the first place. The Bible doesn't tell us that. The Bible doesn't react that way. Matter of fact, the book of Hebrews, which Caleb read here this morning from the New King James translation, is all about that. Backsliding. Now, it's not backsliding into another religion per se. It's backsliding back into the Old Testament, which really would be a different form of religion, but they're both the product of God. It's just the New Testament through Christ replaced that Old Testament. But as I was saying, the Hebrews was written because Christians were on the verge of going back to their old ways of the Jewish faith and abandoning, and this is the worst part of it, abandoning their relationship with Jesus. There's a theme throughout the book, and some of the verses and chapters are up there, but it's all about holding on. I have that goofy picture up there of a gentleman sitting in a boat. And you notice that there's no motor on that boat. He has no oars. He has no rows. Yeah. He has no oars in his hands to try to move that boat. So guess what? He's drifting. There have been individuals who have been shipwrecked before and jumped on a lifeboat and drifted and drifted and drifted for days, even some for weeks. And you know what? Some of that might have been because they didn't even know which way to go. Imagine being shipwrecked in the middle of the night and thrown into a life raft. You have no compass. How do you know what direction you even need to head in? Now I want you to think about that, because there may be some of us sitting here this morning that are drifting and they don't even know which way they're going. Maybe it's because you didn't grow up going to church. You didn't grow up studying the Bible. Maybe you didn't have parents that led you in that direction. Maybe you did, and maybe you're here today and you're sitting here thinking, I've heard some things here that are different than some of the things I've heard all my life. One very important thing to add to that is, if you're sitting in our audience, listening on Facebook, and you're saying, why do they worship the way they do? Why do they do this? Why do they do that? Please don't wonder. Ask. And what we'll do is we'll pick up the Bible together. We'll go through the Bible and we'll say, we do what we do because God has commanded us to. And that's why we do it. But I also stand up here saying, don't take my word for it. Let's open the Bible and make sure that what I am saying is God's word. Because let's face it, if it's not God's word, useless information is coming out of my mouth. Because it's not leading us to salvation. In 2 Peter chapter 2, verses 20 through 22, it says this. It says, "For if after they have escaped the pollution of the world through the knowledge of the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, they are again entangled in them and overcome, the latter end is worse for them than the beginning. For it would have been better for them to not have known the way of righteousness than, having known it, to turn from the holy commandments delivered to them. But it has happened to them according to the true proverb, a dog returns to his own vomit, and a sow, having washed to hear, wallowing in the mire." Tell you what, you think about that for a minute. Anyone that has ever had a dog, okay? The scriptures say this. That's the only reason I'm talking about it, okay? And I'm sure if you've ever seen a dog get sick and then come back, and most of us are like, wait a minute, stop, get out of there, don't do that. Because it's unnatural to us. It's something we would never, ever even think about doing. But it's natural to the dog. And what this passage is saying is, it's talking about individuals that knew God, that knew Christ, that had salvation. They walked away from it. And he's saying, you know what? And he's not saying there's a hell for people who were Christians and walked away and a hell for people who never believed. The punishment's the same. But I think we all understand that when we know better and yet we still do wrong, we feel worse about it when it happens. And that's exactly what Peter is trying to say. Imagine dedicating your life but giving up, and then coming before God on judgment and probably wanting to fall on your knees, which we all will. The Bible says even those that are unbelievers are going to come down to their knees at one point. But unfortunately, that point will be too late. But it's not something that is lightly talked about in the Scriptures. Throughout the Scriptures, we see this idea of people falling away. 1 Corinthians 9, 24 and 27, Galatians 5 and verse 4, 1 Timothy 1 and verse 19 through 20, and chapter 4, 1 through 2. Those are just a few of the other verses that talk about this type of thing. I'm sure that when Brent was talking about the picture earlier of Chuck and Bob by the attendance board, that there's probably many here that have been attending this congregation for many, many years that are probably thinking, I know a lot of those numbers that stopped coming. I know a lot of those folks that walked away from God. And you know what? Maybe in the very beginning you reached out to them. I'm sure a lot of you did. But he's right. Numbers are not everything, but it does mean a lot. I mean, if we filled these pews all the way to the brim and it was all a bunch of unfaithful people, it wouldn't be worth it. But if we filled these pews and got to the point where we said, we need more space, and it was because people were being converted and people were being brought to Christ, how wonderful that would be. You know, we must pay attention to Jesus and his words unless we are going to drift away. And we see this idea, Hebrews 2, verse 1, chapter 3, verse 1, 12, 1 through 2. You know, the problem here that the Hebrew writer is referring to especially is not a rejecting of the faith problem. It is a problem of neglecting the faith. So it's the idea that individuals that know of it, maybe even had it in their heart, were converted, were saved, but then began to neglect that salvation that is freely given. Hebrews chapter 2 and verse 33 says, how shall we escape if we neglect so great a salvation, which at the first began to be spoken by the Lord, and was confirmed by us, by those who heard him. I hope you're not neglecting the faith, the salvation that God freely gives you. You know, in a little while, I would say shortly, but then I'll jinx myself and I'll just keep preaching for a very long time. But in a little while, we're going to offer an invitation. You know, now that invitation is open to anyone who needs it. But as Christians, we don't always need to come to the front pew and ask for prayers when we've fallen from God, when we have sinned. Sometimes it takes us falling on our knees. And some of you may be thinking, well, if I get down on my knees, I'm never getting up. Well, then, you know what? Get on your knees in your mind, in your heart. And say, God, forgive me of what I have done. You know, there is great danger in drifting away from God. Hebrews 12 and verse 25 says, see that you do not refuse him who speaks. For if they did not escape who refuses him who spoke on earth, much more shall we not escape if we turn away from him who speaks from heaven. Do you ever neglect God's word? You know, I was out at the camp a couple of times this week, and I know that we say no visitors, but being on the board, sometimes there's reasons I need to go down there other than even picking up my daughter. Unfortunately, my trip, and I will not get into details on this, but unfortunately my trip down there on Friday had to do with a lot more things than just picking Erica up and bringing her home. We live in a confused world. I'll just leave it at that. And we need to pray for our young people. But more so than anything, as parents, as grandparents, we need to do everything we can to encourage our children to know God. Because it's the only answer that there is. There's nothing else that can be done in this world to fix it. Now, we can say peace, we can say love, we can say compassion, but guess what? If we bring God into the picture, all those things will be added. God is the answer, and our children need God. You know, there are many in this world that fail to grow spiritually. If the Apostle Paul was writing you a letter right now, I want you to think about it. I years ago, and I couldn't remember the exact year I was baptized. I remembered the date because the date was very easy because it was December 2nd, which was in between my father's and my brother's birthday. So that Wednesday night, I can remember that. And I couldn't remember the year. And then years ago, my parents were doing some cleaning up and things, and they found my old baptismal certificate. And I looked at that thing and I saw William Covan on the bottom of that certificate, which brought a lot of good memories to my mind. But I have that hanging in my office to remind me, not that I need a piece of paper to tell me that I'm a Christian, but I have it to remind me how long I've been a Christian. I've been a Christian for right around 30 years now. I was 10 years old when I decided to become a Christian. And in that 30 years, there were many times that I did not live the way that I should have. There were times that I neglected the salvation that was given to me. But never once have I ever looked back and said, why did I get baptized? Because I know. I got baptized because I wanted Jesus to forgive me of my sins. I wanted to become a Christian like my parents. I wanted to do what was right. But you know what? In that 30 years, there have been times that, well, let's just face it, there were times that I could probably look at myself and say, you're never going to be a preacher if you keep living this way. But we can not grow spiritually, and sometimes that's because we neglect His Word. Hebrews chapter 5, verse 11 through chapter 6, verse 1, this is just a portion of this. Therefore, leaving the discussion of the elementary principle of Christ, let us go on to perfection, not laying again the foundation of repentance from dead works of faith towards God. So how important is God's Word? Now, I was going with a thought a minute ago, and I went off kilter there, but if Paul was writing you a letter right now, and you thought about that time frame of how long you've been a Christian, would Paul be writing in his letter, why are you still taking in milk when you should be taking in meat? Why are you still in your infancy as a Christian when you should be growing in your faith? I want you to think about that for a minute. I want you to think about yourself and no one else. Not the person sitting beside you, not your husband, not your wife, but you and you alone. Are you still taking in mother's milk, to just use it that way, when you should be eating solid foods? I'm going to tell you this. I hope that your answer is you're on solid food. You're getting stronger. You're growing. But I also want to point out the fact that if you're sitting there right now and you're saying, you know what? I've been a Christian for a long time. There's more that I need to learn. There's more I need to do. Well, guess what? We're all still breathing, right? God gave us another day when we woke up this morning, didn't we? Start today. Start growing more today. And I'll tell you what, I have a ton of different study tools, a ton of different ideas of, ways to read the Bible, time periods. When I was at camp on Friday, I was talking to one of the directors, and he goes, the funny thing is, I've come down here to camp and I've neglected my Bible reading here because he's been so busy with the kids and things, And he said, when I get out of here, I'm going to do the 90-day reading that I always do. So I'm going to go back, and he's got a way that, he has so many chapters that he reads, and in 90 days he goes through the whole book, Old and New Testament. Are you growing in your faith? You look at the book of Psalms 119, a bunch of different verses from here. Starting in verse 9, though, how can a young man cleanse his way? By taking heed according to your word. With my whole heart I have sought you. Oh, let me not wander from your commandments. Your word I have hidden in my heart, that I might not sin against you. Think about that. Your word I have hidden in my heart, so I will not sin against you. Verse 18, open my eyes that I may see wondrous things from your law. Verse 47 and 48, and I will delight myself in your commandments, which I love. My hands also I will lift up to your commandments, which I love, and I will meditate on your statutes. Do we neglect God's people And I'm not going to get into a long dissertation about attendance to church with this, but I'll tell you what, there has been something that I feel came completely from evil and sin and Satan, and that was this virus that has been separating us for about the last year. Now, we have done what we could to try to stay connected, but you know what? You look at that number board, and if you go back pre-COVID, now I'm not going to get up to quite that high number that was in that picture, but we had 90 to 100 people here most Sundays. Now 79 today, that's up a little bit. Not only is it important to come together and worship God, but it is important to come together to encourage one another. You know, David said, "I was glad when you said to me, 'Let us go to the house of the Lord.'" How do we know if we're drifting away from the Lord? Our time with God's people needs to extend beyond just worship. And I'll tell you, that's been very difficult in the past year. It really has. Things are opening up. We're starting to get out more. We're starting to go around people more. But you know what? Let us not neglect one another. We need to encourage one another. In Acts 2, they continued steadfast in the apostles' doctrine. Daily, they were together. You know, we neglect God by our priorities. You know, many people are preoccupied with the things that are unimportant to eternity. 2 Corinthians 4:17-18, "For our light affliction, which is but for a moment, is working for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. While we do not look at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporary, but the things which are not seen are eternal." We must always put God first. Too many of us parents are missing the opportunity with our children because we mix up our priorities. Remember, our children need God in their lives. It doesn't matter how successful they are in their job. It doesn't matter how successful they are worldly ways of raising their family. It doesn't matter how many children they have. It doesn't matter how big their house is or how nice it is or any of those things. The things that are seen are only temporary. You know, look at the Apostle Paul here in Philippians 3. You know, and he talks all about, he says, I'm not going to hold on to the past. I'm not going to let the past draw me down. That's one negative thing that I've seen in our country lately. Is people trying to say that, I'm going to stand up here right now and say our country has done some bad and dumb and stupid things in the past history. Developing this world, slavery, things such as that, those were horrible things. Some of the things we did to the Indians, horrible, travesties. But if we try to rewrite that history, how can we teach our children about how wrong it was so somebody doesn't come along and have them repeat it? When Adolf Hitler became in power in Germany, do you think anyone thought that we're going to build a bunch of concentration camps and try to eradicate the Jews? Do you think anyone thought that thought when he became into power? No, he started to build some infrastructure. He started to rebuild the military, even though he wasn't supposed to, according to the treaties in World War I. Did you ever hear of the Volkswagen? You know what that was called? The people's car. Do you know why? Because it was built in such a way they could sell it cheap, and lots more people could have it. So guess what? They're looking at what he's doing, and they're saying, this is great. And then mixed in there, propaganda started popping up about how evil Jews were. And the horrible thing, they would start saying, well, if your neighbor's a Jew, all kinds of things that they started to trickle in to the point where people got to a position, and I'm not going to say every German that lived in Germany agreed with this, because we know stories of ones that helped people in that time. But the majority of the power, at least, convinced an awful lot of people to let's exterminate a race. We need to know our history. We need to know how it went so that we can look back and say, I'm not repeating that stupid thing. I'm not going to do that horrible thing. So yeah, maybe your stomach's smiling now because it says conclusion. But if we want to neglect the drifting away, our lives must be anchored in Jesus and his promises. That's the only way. We are either drifting because of neglect, or we are growing because of our effort and our attention towards God. The anchor is probably, if not the most important thing on the boat, it's one of them. Obviously, you want the rudder too, and maybe the sail or the engine, or whatever kind of boat you're on. But if you're stuck out in the water in a boat, the last thing you want is a storm to come and throw your boat all over the place. Now, obviously, if you're in the middle of the ocean, you're not going to have an anchor long enough there. But the whole point is you're close to land, where rocks may be. That's going to hold you out there in that deeper water and keep you safe, even when it's rocking, even when turmoil is happening. And you know what? Christians are the best people in the world to handle turmoil. Now, you may be thinking, man, when things happen bad in my life, I fall apart. Maybe you need to put a little more faith in God. Because if we're truly faithful to God, no matter what comes our way, no matter how high the waves are, we know that God, Jesus, is protecting us. A little story that you may hear on Wednesday night in our Bible class. Last thing I want to share with you, there was a family from Liverpool, England, and they were on a boat, and they were traveling from England to New York. And they hit rough waters. Storm started throwing the boat all over the place, and the boat's rocking, and there's a little girl down in the cabin, and she's laying in her room, and she's, most kids would be a little scared if they were in a boat that was getting tossed all around, and she looks to her mom, and her dad happens to be the captain of the boat. She looks to her mom, and she says, Mom, is Dad driving? She said, yes, he is. He's up there right now. And she said, well, then we're going to be just fine. She rolled over and she went back to sleep. That was the faith she had in her father. And it's the faith that we as Christians can have in God. Because if you take a look at Hebrews 6, 18, verse 19, God doesn't lie. If God says something's going to be, it will be. So I pray here this morning that if you're here, and you have any need, whether to be baptized into Christ, maybe you need to rededicate your life, maybe you need prayers of encouragement, maybe there's something that just you can't handle on your own. If you're going through something and you can't handle it on your own, don't. give it to God. And that sometimes means asking for encouragement from your brothers or sisters in Christ. But if you're here this morning and you have a need, please come forward as we stand and sing this song.